In conversation with Katie Greggs. Katie Greggs, a resilient U.S. Army combat veteran and survivor of military sexual assault, has played a transformative role in shaping Army policies for emotional trauma victims. Beyond volunteering at Connections of Cumberland and excelling in leadership roles, she has received recognition including the 2020 A. Philip Randolph Institute Community Leader Award. Katie is the CEO of Fayetteville PACT organization. Committed to advocacy, Katie serves in key positions related to domestic violence and women's rights, actively championing the reauthorization of the Lautenburg Amendment and advocating for violence against women art. Additionally, she has served as a rape crisis advocate, ensuring sustainable infrastructure for disenfranchised communities and assisting victims of domestic violence and sexual assault. Her dedication extends to ensuring that government agencies leave no one behind. And on today's episode of Auto Interview, it's my utmost pleasure and joy to have on the show today Katie Greggs. How are you doing, Katie?
I am doing great, Peter, and thank you for having me on your wonderful, wonderful podcast, English
Yeah,
Literature. How are you?
I'm doing very fine too. It's so amazing to have you on the show today. I'm so excited. We're going to be having a conversation around your writing.
Yes, I am looking forward to it.
Yeah. So, Katie, your book, The Mother, The Soldier, The Activist, Resistance is Futile and Justice Will Prevail, follows through your life of activism and advocacy. From your early days in the military to your tireless effort in fighting for justice and equality. I'd love to ask you, could you tell us what inspired you to write this book?
Well, Peter, first of all, I want to thank you for having me on this show again. And also coming from an author to author, this is a hard process to write, right? So mentally, it can become draining, it can become emotionally a struggle, and it can really, really make you pull your hair out, which I haven't done. So that's a good thing. Um, but I had went to New Orleans and we were going to the Essence Festival and we had a delayed flight, right? So I'm sitting in the waiting room waiting for the flight and I'm looking around. Everybody's on their phone, on a tablet, some type of device, social media, something. So to myself, I'm thinking like for the whole hour, like no conversation. People are actually sitting there with their mate and not even talking to each other, just on their phones. So I'm actually thinking to myself, we ask for no surveillance, right, in our communities, no facial recognition, but yet we giving all information on the internet, right? We're giving all the
Mm,
information to the AI. So how do we stop that? And as a human rights activist, and I've been doing this work since 2015, since I got out the United States Army as a combat veteran. I have been to many different countries, even your country, and served. So looking around, I'm like, how do we argue AI from evolving? Even as an activist, like, will I ever be needed? That's the question, Peter. Will I be needed anymore? Will advocacy be needed anymore? Will that, that therapist that you go to every day, will it be a human therapist or will it be an AI therapist, right? That, I mean, it's laughter, but it's real, right? We're seeing that in Dubai. They have a principal as an AI right now, like they're using it as a pilot program, right? Then in the Amazon warehouse, they're using AIs because it's only $13 a day to use AI versus a human being,
mm,
where it's costly, right? Because of healthcare and dental. So when we're talking deeper, I looked at the economics, but I also look at the reality. The reality is you cannot complain about surveillance. You cannot complain about photo recognition if you're on your phone 80% of the day. If you're on social media 80% of the day and giving that information, how do we
mm,
complain about something, but yet and still we're providing the tools to annihilate us? An annihilation
mm,
of humanity is what I'm talking about. I'm not
mm,
talking about us living. I'm talking about annihilation, providing all the information needed to destroy us, not only mentally, emotionally, but
mm.
also physically.
Wow, that's a trunk load of advice. That's a trunk load of inspiration. I love getting to know about the background towards the making of your book and how you decided to write this book. Sounds quite amazing. And you have such a whole lot of cogent point, very important point, things that pertain to humanity and its reality, These are matters that need to be well addressed. So I'm quite excited to hear this from you. And thank you so much for mentioning it.
No problem. Because I know in Nigeria, there's a lot of, issues with technology and
Yeah.
utilizing and taking the resources out of Nigeria to,
Mm.
test and research and then putting them back in there that could probably, potentially kill the neighborhood and kill the people with radiation. I mean, because you have everyone's asking for broadband services and internets and communities, but they don't realize the radiation in the towers and everything else that can reflect on your health and environmental. So, that plays a part too. But for me to write this book, I wanted to make sure that activists, activists like me fighting for police accountability, police reform, right? Social justice reform, fighting for people's rights as a human being. This also is something that we have to fight, is AI, for human beings to still exist and have rights.
Absolutely. Wow. Wow, that's amazing. That's very breathtaking, I love the sound of it. Thank you so much. And I'd like to ask you too, Katie, for readers who haven't read the book yet, and without giving much information away, could we have a sneak of what we'd expect in terms of themes, picking up the mother, the soldier, the activist? Also, how did you came up with the title? Because I love it so much.
Well, it's funny. So for the title, I'm gonna be honest with you, Peter. Like, I love watching different, movies, TV shows.
Oh,
I indulge. I'm not really a sci-fi person, though, right? So, so my significant other, my boyfriend, right? We were sitting there
yeah.
watching Star Wars. And I'm just like, oh, Star Wars is pretty, deep. It's talking about the future, how it looks,
Mm,
and how we have to fight for different galaxies and everything.
yeah.
So me and my boyfriend was having a discussion, and then I was like, wow, resistance is futile. Just that word itself is deep. Resistance is futile.
Absolutely.
Like, how do we get to where we're going to continue to fight, because it's so futile, it's so hard, you have so many barriers, you have so many, you got to maneuver on the battlefield to get your justice, to get your success. It's like a
Mm,
chessboard where you're trying to take down the queen and get checkmate, right?
mm,
So when I sat here, it took me, and I'm not going to lie to you, it took me literally maybe a month to come up with, like, how do I put resistance is futile with justice,
mm,
right? How do I put that together? So with me watching Star Wars, with me watching RoboCop again to actually do my research to
yeah.
show how this will look in the future, also watching Minority Report, I'm like, hey, this title, Resistance is Futile and Justice Will Prevail, is never give up hope. Keep fighting, keep pushing,
Mm,
even though you have that resistance. Keep going forward, because justice will prevail.
absolutely.
We have so many fighters that have been out here fighting for years. We have people that have died for this justice. And we got to make sure we remember that we got to keep going, even when
Mm,
we have that resistance.
mm,
So that is what this book is about. It's also dedicated to those that have lost their lives from police accountability here locally in Fayetteville and some in North Carolina. And how they still haven't had justice. I mean, we have families that where their son has died in 2001 and still haven't gotten justice, nor
wow.
have they got even monetary funds, right, for their
Mm,
son dying for wrongful death, for homicide. Let's call it a homicide. That's what it is. When a police officer kills you, it is a homicide. It is not, a misconduct per se. It's a
mm.
homicide. Okay.
Wow. That's amazing, really. I love the sound of this. And I can go on and on. I love your answers to this question. Sounds quite pulling, educative, interesting, and very impactful to me, really. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah. And I'd like to ask you, could you tell us what impact, and I know from even listening to this few conversation we've had so far, I've felt the few impact, but then I'd like to still ask you, could you tell us what impact you want your book to have on the readers?
Well, the impact I want them to have is that we have to come together and form some type of movement, some type of, type of formality of understanding what AI looks like in our homes, in our lives, in our livelihood every day. Like, is our quality of life is going to decrease, which I wrote in the book that it will economically if AI takes over. So I want them to get out a lot, like understanding what justice looks like, understanding the barriers I had to go through. And there's a chapter 3 where I wrote about the struggle within, Peter, because this is not an easy fight. This fight requires everybody in my family to uplift me every day, empower me every day, everybody I'm close to in my inner circle to empower me every day. There's times I struggle. There's times I cried with that mother on the phone at 4 o'clock in the morning because her only son died from a police officer, right? So I also have my own struggles, my own doubts. Like, how am I going to tell this family? Guess what? They're not going to try this police officer. They're not going to arrest this man. And this man can be a police officer. Ain't nothing you can do about it. How do you tell a family member that with only hope they have? So I want people to make sure they impact that this is, me being a survivor of military sexual assault and having to advocate for myself. It was hard for me being a mother of children and active duty in the Army and saying, hey, I'm going to have to continue to stand in this front and fight for my own rights, and I had to learn that as a survivor, not a victim, but a survivor, because if I didn't have in my mind I'm going to survive, I would have been a victim and I would have pretty much died. And not dying, but dying inside, which would have harmed my family, which would have harmed me to do things in my livelihood, daily activities. So I had to learn that. And this book is going to help people. I also put in my book how to actually organize a community, how to go out and get people to build a movement to make sure what you're fighting for actually becomes successful. Mobilize people, how to talk to people, that may look like you and they tell you, you know what, get out of my office, because it has happened. I have sat down with a man that is actually a politician that has a Confederate flag right behind you, and you're looking at that flag and you're looking at that man like, how do I get past the flag? And I'm having a conversation of saying, I need justice. Now, will he give me justice because this person is not his color? Maybe not. But guess what? Resistance. And you have to pass that resistance.
Wow, this is amazing. This is so amazing. I keep, taking in your words, and each sentence will cause me to want to think, reflect, and take a deep breath and digest all you've said. This is amazing, thought-provoking, and very huge. It's a very huge one. And also, it's going to make a very great impact to humanity. This is amazing. You've got an amazing team. You've got an amazing concept. You've got an amazing book, and I'm so intrigued to even have you on the show.
Oh, thank you. Well, I speak everything from the heart. I just want to make sure we're clear. And I have a book manager, but I don't write anything down. So everything is from the heart. This work is from the heart, my compassion for, each other, because that's why we're on earth. We're only here because we're supposed to love thy neighbor. And if our neighbor can't survive, we can't survive. We got to understand that.
Yeah, that's amazing. As you're speaking, a question come to my mind. I don't know, but I think part of your books or part of your writing is inspired by what you've been through personally, right?
Yes.
Good. Now, I'd like to ask you, what is the most difficult aspect of writing the book? Did you experience any challenges at some point writing the book, even though part of it was inspired by what you've been through personally?
Oh, yes, Peter. So it took a lot for me to write, because I don't really write. I don't even write speeches. I just go in and I just go ahead and go with what God needs me, because that's my savior. That's my, that's my serenity, is to find out how I'm supposed to, move. Like, what am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to say? Right. And I think we write down speeches just so we can stay on task. But I believe that things from the heart is better to show that compassion, that empathy. Right. But for me, writing the book, I only went through I'm going to say about a good month. I went through actually a writer's block. And that was because I struggled a lot with chapter 3, which is the struggle within. And then, of course, I struggled also with my last chapter, the present day and the future. Like, today, tomorrow, you know, how that look. And the reason why I struggle with that a lot is because I had to think about not only myself in the book as a memoir, but I also had to think about all the cases that I helped, all the people that I had conversations with. You know, even when I got arrested at the General Assembly for, you know, doing public comment, right? How I felt, you know, the humility, the embarrassment, you know, the fact that someone took my rights, and I have been fighting for years for people's rights as a combat veteran in countries that I never even know the language in, right? You're here fighting for all these people, and then you come back and you're like, you're getting arrested just for public speaking against a budget that will reflect and hurt people, you know? So that was a lot of struggle for me. And I had to learn humility as a leader. I had to learn that that resistance right there and that embarrassment right there is going to make me stronger. That's going to put light into a family that believes that, you know what, we don't have no justice. We're never going to get justice for our child. We're just going to bury our child and move on. And we'll never go back and say we need justice, right? But to put that light in that family and say, keep fighting. And no matter what, always remember that you are going to get justice. And never, ever, ever let back down because of that one room that you went into and had a conversation with that one person that told you no. Keep going.
Oh, wow, that's amazing. And that got me to want to say the second part of the title again. Resistance is futile and justice will prevail. That alone, I love that section of the book title. Thank you so much. And now, apart from mother, the soldier, the activist, do you have any other works you've authored or maybe currently working on?
So right now I'm not working on any book right now because I want to get this one out. I want to make sure that people understand that I'm not here to try to get money for the book. I'm not here trying to get royalties for the book. I just want people to be educated. And that's what the book is about, educating people. And also it could be someone that was thinking the same thoughts, right? And couldn't put it on paper. So I'm also assisting them in that process and showing them how you can put your thoughts on paper, how you can utilize your thoughts in your voice, and how you can put it on paper where it can change other people's lives because we speak with each other through each other, right? But the mother, the soldier, the activist itself is me being first a mother, me having the faith in the Lord Jesus Christ first before I became a soldier in the United States Army, even though both of my parents were in the Army and my sister was in the Army. And then I have cousins and aunts and uncles that served, which was a tradition because, you know, my great-great-grandfather served as a black man in an all-white platoon fighting in World War II. And he would sit down and tell us the stories. And I would sit there and be so inspired, like, oh, I got to go in the Army because this is what he did. And I got to make sure I understand. I will go through colorism, sexism, racism, but will I stand for it? Did I know I was going to be a victim of sexual assault? You know, while I was serving with the people I was supposed to trust. And then, you know, having that the activists, right? So, you know, I advocated and continue to advocate while I was even in the Army for military sexual assault victims because I myself was one, right? And when I came out, I suffered a traumatic brain injury while I was in the Army, came out and said, you know what, let me go out and still help. And if it wasn't for one of my battle buddies, Carla Acasa, coming to my house saying, you need to get out, you need to go tell your story, you need to help people because if you don't, what do they have, right?
Absolutely.
But I'm gonna tell you a story, Peter, and I did put it in there. I was at Cumberland Connections, which is here in Fayetteville, and I did case intake. And what happened was this was just volunteer work. So what happened was I met a woman that was of color like me. She was 25 years old, and all 5 of her children were from her father. So sitting there and having this conversation with this woman, the only thing the woman was thinking about is, can he find me? That's what she would say to me. The whole time I'm like, okay, we're going to get you shelter. We're going to get you a job. Because through Cumberland Connections, they provided jobs and shelters. And she came from Florida. And all she could say is, will he find me? Now, just imagine. And I sat there and I said, I got to keep doing this work. Even though I have a traumatic brain injury, even though I had, suffered myself from, breast cancer. Right. And I'm a breast cancer survivor, free as of 2020. Right. So I'm like, I still have to keep going because if I don't write this book to show somebody that there is hope and they can keep going, regardless, then what else am I doing here, Peter? Why am I even existing at this point? You
Wow.
could be a survivor and just don't have the voice or give the voice, but what are you really doing at that point?
Mm.
You're just here, you know what I mean? So that right there tore me up. I believe I cried for like a day and a half because looking at this woman, and every day I talk to her saying, hey, let me come do this. Let me come do that. Let me help you. Let me do this. Let me do that. And at the same time, in her only mind, all she could think about is, will he come take my children? Because even though, in some states that people don't know, which, we argue this as activists for sexual assault, human trafficking, and domestic violence victims, as an advocate, the rapist can still come and get custody. And that is factual, so that fight itself is one, right? Just imagine you go through this trauma and yet this person can come and take your child and
Mm.
get.
Wow.
So that tore me up a lot because I myself, when my assault happened, I chose not to ask questions. I said, do what you have to do. So I didn't even know if I was pregnant, right? I didn't even know. Like I didn't want to know. I
Mm.
told the doctor what they had to do. Don't tell me anything. I didn't even want to look at the paperwork until 3 years later. So like, and it took me years before I got justice to get my justice from those that did that to me. Okay.
Wow.
So
Wow. This is amazing. I keep saying this is amazing. This is awesomely amazing because I love your answer to this question. They are number one, educative, they're inspirational, they're quite deep, thought-provoking, and it's one that actually arouses more conversation, more curiosity. And I love your storyline in there and all that you've said so far. You've got an amazing response, and thank you so much for your deep explanation on this. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Now, I'd like to ask you too, could you tell us what publishing is like for a published author like yourself? Are there any challenges you've encountered ever since it got published?
Well, I just want to make sure that people understand something, and no one has really like saw errors in my book. So there's errors in this book, right? There's errors with spacing, periods, commas, and the reason why I didn't have a problem with it when it first printed, because I was like, wait a minute, I got to reprint this because it's all jacked up, right? But then I said, wait a minute, this book is about AI. Let's show how you can use AI generator and how it messes up, right?
Mm.
But anyway, the publishing part, I didn't really have any too much struggles like some people did. I think it was just a matter of waiting and getting everything approved on these engines, these search engines, but also coming up with the cover. My kids actually helped me with the cover. So they
Beautiful.
helped me design this cover to
Wow.
show, a soldier and then a mother sitting there with a child, right? With the
Mhm.
whole, AI strings in the back, right? So there was several different covers that I was just like, okay, so let me get with somebody to design a cover, right? But publishing it, I didn't really have a problem. I mean, I see a lot of authors struggle with publishing, but I myself didn't really have a problem, maybe because maybe because I'm a little bit more maybe I'm a little bit more compassionate about what I wrote, and I want it to be
Mm.
truth and not false. And I want my words to mean something versus someone else's words. And
Mm.
then I also wanted to make sure that, you know, people will remember. Because remember what Dr. Maya Angelou said? She said, people remember what you did, but they'll never remember your name, right? So even though we done so much work in this world, they won't
Mhm.
remember your name, but they will remember this title. They will remember my name because of this book and how it inspired them. But if not, guess what? People won't remember.
Mm. Wow. That's so amazing. And again, I love the title, The Mother, the Soldier, the Activist. Resistance is futile. It's futile, and justice will always, sorry for adding my own, will always prevail. That's amazing, actually. That's really amazing. That's very amazing. And I'd like to ask you too, is there anything that you'd love to share with the viewers about your book that we did not mention and explain to them?
Well, I want to share. Yes, I want them to know about chapter 2. Chapter 2 is artificial intelligence for the police. The reason why I want them to really indulge in that chapter is
Yeah.
because right now we have several different states and countries that is going through a trial for AI police being in these offices and services. So the question in my chapter 2 is who's behind, right? Who is behind the software? Who is behind uploading the software, and who is dictating what those artificial intelligence police do. So chapter 2 is very important because when we're talking about oversight of the government, we're talking about oversight of ensuring our health and our welfare is taken care of. Let's talk about oversight of artificial intelligence with the police. So I want them to definitely indulge in that chapter because it goes into explaining the cost efficient that your police department actually they'll cut their costs by $30 million if they have AI police in there. And what would they do with that $30 million? Would the county or your city or your elected officials use that money for the infrastructures and building up these communities or prisons? Will they use it for prisons and more prisons? Or how would that look? So economics plays a huge part, and your tax paying money plays a huge part in how this will look. So that chapter, I want them to focus in on, like, should you go ahead and start advocating against AI, or should you use your phone for 80% of the day? Right? That's the question of the day. Should you use your phone? Should you use that doorbell cam? Should we use cameras at this point? Who's seeing us? Who sees us? Right? So that's a very important chapter because we pay taxpayer money and we should be able to go advocate and say, we don't want this money used for AI. We don't want this money to use for our facial recognition. We don't want you to use this money to scan our license plate and then come pick us up. The police come to your house. We don't want them to use our information so they can go and get one of your cousins that might have committed a crime 10 years ago. Because that's exactly what would happen. Okay. So the connections of it, the interfiction of it, we need people to understand how you can go to your city and your county and say, look, let's not use this money for more surveillance. Let's use less of this money for surveillance. But then we also got to look into the budgeting and where that money goes, right? Because if we have money being used for buses and we don't have money used for homelessness, then where are we?
Wow, that's amazing. That's really amazing. I so much, man, listening to your answers to this question is quite captivating and compelling to want me to, check up the book. So this is very amazing that, you're talking about this. I love all of your answers so far on the questions given. That's so wholesome. That's so wholesome.
Well, it's just the truth, right? Because like I told you earlier, annihilation of the human beings will start from economics first. So the livelihood and the quality of life, if that decreases because you don't have a job because AI took your job, or your business don't have human beings because you have an AI. So economics plays a huge part in annihilation of humanity.
Absolutely. Wow, that's great. And I like you. Would you like to read a short section to the audience from your book? It
Sure.
could be your favorite line, paragraph, or even a page if you would like to.
Sure. I would like a part in my book. The part that I'm going to read is going to be for the future, tomorrow, and how it looks. Okay. So let's go into what should we allow ourselves to continue to down this path where our children and our teachers become collateral damage in the fight against gun violence. Okay. Could AI police be the solution for gun violence? Would they be able to detect potential threats, counsel students, and ensure the safety of our educational institutes? And if schools were no longer used for the intent purpose, who would be held accountable? Will we even have schools because AI has risen? These questions weighed in my mind, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic, which reshaped the landscape of education. Many teachers chose to leave the profession, seeking safer alternatives at risk of active shooters, becoming yet another threat to the well-being. The rise of online schooling further complicates matters, with parents opting for remote learning over traditional classroom settings at college levels. How does it look when AI comes in and take over in our education system? Will they be police or will they be teachers?
Wow. Those are deep questions. Those are thought-provoking. Those are deep questions. Those are thought-provoking questions. Those are questions that will cause you to think. And this is actually reality. These things are gradually taking themselves into humanity and turning things, messing things up. And the quicker we foresee the danger it poses, the better it would help us to curb it. It's more like a disease that is gradually spreading, trying
Yeah.
to annihilate human being and take in technology, taking AI as a substitute, and which is very, very wrong because there are some things that human being will do much better than the other guys cannot do. So this is very amazing. It's a call for action. It's a call for recognition and awareness as well to the extent. And it's amazing how you can communicate this literature wise. This wholesome. This
Yes.
awesome.
I mean, it was hard. It was hard, Peter. And like you just said, like, the compassion and the empathy that we have as human beings for each other, how
Mm,
does that look? Will we have compassion anymore because of AI? Like, do we indulge with human being as social? Or we will go to the social of only AI? Will we
mm,
rely on AI more than we do as the human being connection, right? And that goes all the way to humanity once again. It's a decrease already right now of people having babies because of cost effective, how much it costs, to have children. So will AI be the rise because we don't have the generation after generation after generation complicating, right?
wow.
So that also plays a part in it. And then it also plays a part in destruction of those communities that is black and brown, and how you can destroy it easier now because you have technology versus them having to over police or under police the neighborhoods, right?
Mm,
Or the fact that we have people going to jail and separation of black families and brown families. Now, how does that look? Will DSS be a AI? Will they determine if your family is not suitable to live together? How
mm,
does foster care look? How does the jail systems look?
wow.
Who determines who goes to jail at that point?
These are actually, they are not funny, but it's actually real questions you're asking. It's
Yeah,
amazing.
I mean, because we don't have the answers. No one is answering the questions of how it looks.
Yeah.
The only concern about is digital currency, and how do we go from having money printed versus digital currency? Well,
Mm,
guess what? We can get digital currency, but who's in charge of the digital currency? Who's
mm,
watching our money? And does it change? Because in China, just so you know, in China, it changes your social economics. So if I am making only 38,000 a year, guess what? I'm separated from everybody else because I only make 38,000 a year. So we already separated by racism and genders, but now we'll
mm,
be separated for real by social economics. If you're not making enough money, you may not get that access to that bank account money. You
mm,
may not get that access to that grant or that business funding that you had before. You may not get that access to that $25 an hour because the
mm.
AI is getting paid $13 an hour. So you might get cut somewhere economically. And it always go back to economics. And Dr. Angela Davis said it best, which is one of my great, role models, and I follow her. She said you cannot separate racism from capitalism.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, I'm not only talking about black and brown, I'm talking about all people in
All
this book
people.
because everyone's going to be affected,
Yeah,
all the way down to your
absolutely.
neighbor's neighbor. And does it create crime because everyone's affected? Will it create crime because that person don't have a job because AI took over?
It will.
How does it affect your neighborhood? Because it's
Yeah,
going to affect everybody as humans.
absolutely. This is amazing. This is really amazing. And in case we have some viewers who are currently watching this interview, I would love to get a copy of the book. On what platform is it available on for purchase?
So right now, my book is sold in Walmart, Barnes and Nobles, Amazon, Google Play Book Store. It's also on Ingram Spark. So you could just go on there and order it. It's $19.99 for the paperback.
Mm,
Then you get the ebook for $24.99. And I'm hoping I could do Audible here coming up soon in November, and I want to make sure that it's going to be written in 2 languages also.
That's great. And I left a link in the discussion part of this interview where interested viewers can get a copy of Katie Gregg's books directly on Amazon, on Barnes& and Nobles, on Ingram Spark, and also on other platforms. So thank you so much, Katie, for accepting the invitation to be featured on P English Literature. It's awesome having this conversation with you. I love it wholeheartedly.
And thank you, Peter. And don't forget to send me your address so I can copy of my book, and I'll make sure I'll put my signature, right? Because I guess that's important. I mean, I really don't feel like, I mean, everybody likes to do the book signing, but to me, I'm just like, I'm more of a personal person. So I'm just kind of working through that with my book manager, because mentally I'm like, it's okay to do a book signing. But at the end of the day, it's about what I did and how I inspired you. So that's the important part. But please give me your address so I can mail you a book with my autograph on it. And I really appreciate you allowing me to take time in today to have a discussion about my book. And anyone can contact me, or they can book me if they would like for me to come and speak. But I'm going to be real now. I'm not going to take anything away from what I am. But you can contact me on www.kathygreggspeaks.com.
Yeah, that's great. That's amazing. Thank you so much. This was absolutely fun.